you just do it, it'll turn out okay. Today, we were combining two of my favorite things: history and family trees.
Woohoo! Actually, real quick, let me call up the family tree that I went through all that time and energy to make so that I can screen share it when we need to. Yes, sign in, please. Thank you.
You may know my guest from one, our 23-hour review of the Constitution,
Whew.
and some Disney remakes reviews tier list we did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I've talked a little bit on this channel.
She has the whole spectrum of stuff.
I know many things.
But today we're here to talk about the Act of Settlement, 1701 version, that is. Skipping people.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the 1701 Act of Settlement was, I mean, to start with, it was Henry VIII's fault because everything was, but it was the plan to keep there from being a Catholic monarch of England and Great Britain when that, when the United Kingdom became a real thing, but to keep there from being a Catholic monarch ever again.
There was one or two after him, and the second one, first one after him, is the reason why they distrusted Catholics.
Yeah.
Bloody Mary, they called her.
Well, there have been many Catholic monarchs, after all. I mean, for a very, very long time, the monarchs of the United Kingdom or of England were Catholics because that's what
everybody was.
There was,
unless you're from the East, then you're those creepy Orthodox. Then you were those Orthodox.
If you were a Christian and you were in Western Europe, you were a Catholic for a very long time. And then came Henry VIII, which is why we can blame so many things on Henry VIII.
And the funny thing was, he still considered himself Catholic.
Oh, yeah, no. Henry VIII didn't actually like Protestantism very much. He was Catholic, but with him in charge and not the Pope. That was his whole thing. Hi, John. So, when his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, proved unable to conceive a male heir who lived longer than a few months, and to be very, very clear, I think she was menopausal at the time that all of this went down, but blessedly we don't have documentation of that.
So, it's weird, because wasn't she still in her 20s or 30s at the time?
No. Catherine, when Catherine was divorced, remember, she was older than Henry was.
I know she was that much older.
Yeah, let's see here. She was born 1485. So she was 50 when she died, and she died during the reign of Anne Boleyn.
I knew she was married to his big brother at first.
Yeah, she was married to his big brother at first. She was 6 years older than he was.
So I guess that was a lot back then.
It was a lot back then, and even if she had been the same age as he was, being in her early 40s, even today, that's not the best time in your life to conceive. She wouldn't necessarily have been perimenopausal yet or fully menopausal yet at 44, if she, or in her early 40s. I had my daughter when I was 40, and we were very close to giving up trying because we'd reached the stage where it was clear that the time for me to have children was coming to an end. And we'd been trying for a while for our daughter. So, she was not a young woman. This was, nearly 500 years ago. She was just not going to have more children. And she refused to retire to a convent in the good old-fashioned get rid of your wife way. So Henry decided he needed to get a divorce. And the thing is her cousin kind of had an army in Rome at the time. And her
her nephew technically.
Yes. And
a little person known as Charles V. You might have heard of him.
Yeah, minor details. Her parents were these people you may have heard of. Their most Catholic Majesties, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. So the thing is if the Pope had to take sides in this dispute, he was going to take the side of the large and powerful family with an army in his city, as opposed to, and we forget this is what England was at the time, but the upstart king of a tiny kingdom in the middle of freaking nowhere. There was no English empire at the time. They couldn't even keep hold of Ireland, and Scotland was still its own country. So Henry was not a very powerful man. So he didn't get his annulment, which incidentally would have made his daughter Mary illegitimate, which is why Catherine fought the annulment like she did, because she wanted her daughter to remain legitimate. And Henry knew his English history. His family, he was the second member of his line to sit on the English throne. His father had taken over England by right of conquest, defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, and became king. And Henry knew, and I've told this in other, we talked about this when we talked about the Mayflower Compact, but it is basic history that's important to what we're saying. He knew there had been one queen regnant in all of English history to date, and the time that she ruled is known as the Anarchy, and half the kingdom didn't follow her. They followed her cousin because they refused to be ruled by a woman. So Henry's desire for a son makes a lot of sense on a political level. His awareness of biology makes a lot of sense on a historical level. He didn't know that it wasn't his wife's fault that he wasn't having a son. But rather than...
I'm going to say, technically, at this point, he had lots of sons. They are just...
Well, he had a couple of sons at the very least. I've got a book about all of his known and suspected illegitimate children, and there are fewer of them than you might think, but he did have an acknowledged son at this point with a different mistress.
Unfortunately, they don't. If you're not married to them, they can't become king.
He actually considered rewriting things so that his illegitimate son could take the throne after he died, but it didn't matter because his illegitimate son died. Well, Anne was queen, I think.
Ah,
So yeah, but in order to ensure his line, when Anne announced that she was pregnant, which she did by saying, such an uncommon fierce desire to eat apples. The king says it means I am with child. And then running out of the court. Anne had a flair for the dramatic. He broke with Rome so he could marry her so that her child would be legitimate and take the throne, and then she gave birth to Elizabeth. And yeah, that ended poorly for Anne within a couple of years. So Henry very much preferred Catholicism. Catholicism made sense to him. Henry was a very, very intelligent man, but he was a very straightforward thinker in a lot of ways. And he just didn't care about Protestantism. He liked a clear line of succession, but he liked a clear line of succession with him at the top. And I can't help wondering how much of that is because of the favoritism his father had showed his older brother until his older brother died. He liked being the heir a whole lot more than he had liked being the spare. So, obviously, this is a little bit before 1701, given that Elizabeth died in 1603. So,
but background.
Henry dies. His one legitimate son takes the throne, dies young because he's a fairly sickly kid. He dies at like 19 or something, very, very young. His cousin, or, his son's cousin, Jane Grey, takes the throne for 9 days, is deposed by Henry's daughter, Mary, who rules as Mary, Queen of England, now known as both Mary the First and Bloody Mary. And then Mary died of probably uterine cancer. She was also in her 40s when she died and had several phantom pregnancies. And it's pretty clear at this late date that there was a uterine tumor.
Yeah.
Causing
and she also what's the word? She joined contributed. She did the same thing the rest of her Spanish family did. She married her first cousin when she moved.
She did. She married her cousin Philip, who would go on to be King of Spain. And Philip is the one who raised the Spanish Armada against Elizabeth. And my joke has long been that he was just mad that Elizabeth wouldn't marry him after Mary died.
So instead he married his niece.
Yes. Yeah, no, tracing the family trees and when I did family tree for this project, I mostly ignored the partners because that's not the important bit. But if you trace the full family tree of a lot of these royal houses, they are braided. The Habsburgs, God help us, and the Bourbons, and the Ptolemies remain the worst, but the Habsburgs and the Bourbons give them a run for their money. So, Mary dies, Elizabeth takes the throne. Elizabeth reigns a very, very long time and dies without heir because she never married. Whether she's a virgin or not is a historical question that we cannot answer at this point. Certainly, she never married, and the claims that she had secret illegitimate children are, in my opinion, historically laughable.
Had to hide. I'm going away for 9 months. Don't worry about it.
Right. Elizabeth did not have the privacy to have a secret pregnancy, even as a teenager. So no, those claims are ridiculous. And again, even if she'd had an illegitimate child, her illegitimate child couldn't have inherited. So, her successor on the throne, and he's where our story really starts.
Let's go. We
Is,
back up. We need to go back up again because you
well,
see, her father had a sister.
yeah, her father actually had two sisters, Mary and Margaret. And
Margaret.
oh gosh, I can't remember which one James is descended from.
Margaret.
Margaret?
Yeah, Mary
Yes,
was
Margaret.
Jane's great grandmother, and Margaret is the one that married a little person known as James the Fourth of
Fourth.
Scotland.
Yeah, Margaret married James the Fourth of Scotland, and her child was James the Fifth. And James the Fifth's child was also named Mary.
The first.
The thing we're going to learn is there were only 12 names in this era. First names come up a lot. The TV show The Tudors left off Henry's sister Mary because they already had a Mary Tudor and they didn't want to confuse everybody, and his daughter was more important to the story than his sister. So yeah.
His sister's only people only know about his sister because that's where Jane came from.
Yeah. His sister married twice, once to the King of France, and then once she actually chose her own husband, and it's through that line that Jane Grey is descended. So,
real fast, fun fact here. Back on the other side of the family tree, for a while here, it's like Scotland was I was like cursed, but kind of was, because they all became kings or queens in their child or infancies.
Yeah. Margaret's husband died young, and Margaret became regent for their son. Their son died young, and their daughter Mary was sent to France at 6 years old because she was engaged to the Dauphin, the crown prince of France.
I forget when it was, but I think she became queen at 6 days old.
Yeah, she was very, very. Supposedly he turned his head to the wall and died when he learned that she was a girl. Because that's monarchy for you. So she grew up in France, in the French court, very French view towards things, and the Scots and the French were very, very closely allied on the grounds of both hating England a whole lot. Margaret's marrying James the Fourth was supposed to bring peace between the two countries and didn't. So Mary, who's Mary Stuart, also known as Mary, Queen of Scots, her first husband was the Crown Prince of France, who took the throne after his father died from a jousting accident. And he also died fairly young. And she was sent back to Scotland, which she had not seen pretty much as long as she could remember. And she was very, very Catholic. And the Protestants had gone the Scots had gone very, very Protestant in the intervening years. So it was not a great pairing between Mary and Scotland. And she firmly believed that Elizabeth did not have a right to the English throne because Mary was, to the Catholic perspective, illegitimate. So she was very, very clear that she should be the Queen of England. And part of how she cemented her claim on the throne, oh, I'm sure we could all see this one coming. She married her first cousin,
who's also a descendant of Margaret.
Yes. Lord Darnley, he was called. And he was such a terrible person. He cheated on her mercilessly, and he was probably syphilitic, and he hounded her horribly for not making him king because he wanted to be king, and didn't understand that she really kind of couldn't declare it. And frankly, by the time she figured out what he was like, didn't want him to be king anyway. And he stabbed her secretary in front of her while she was like 7 months pregnant, and the man was clinging to her skirts as he died. It was a whole huge thing. And then they blew up her husband, except he wasn't in the building, and so they strangled him in a garden. Very, very messy situation. But the child she had, who was, the descendant of that happy marriage, was made king. She was forced to abdicate for reasons, doesn't matter, more Scottish history, when he was maybe a year old. She was forced to abdicate in his name, so he became James VI of Scotland, and she fled to she was locked up in a Scottish prison. She escaped. She then was locked up in an English prison and was eventually executed for plotting to kill Elizabeth. Technically, they got her on treason, which she argued, in my opinion, correctly, she couldn't be convicted on, because you could only commit treason against your sovereign, and she wasn't English. But it doesn't matter, because, absolute monarch is absolute, and she ended up beheaded. So Elizabeth dies, and her closest relative at this point, because of shenanigans, is James. Who is like her first cousin once removed, I think. If I've got the generations lined up correctly. And I think he's her first cousin twice removed. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he's her first cousin twice removed, because Mary was her first cousin once removed. So, point is, cousin takes the throne. And James, unlike pretty much any other monarch of Scotland, had been raised Protestant. Elizabeth had been raised Protestant, but Elizabeth had grown up in that in Henry VIII's version of Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
And of course lived during her sister's reign, where you were Catholic or you were executed. And her sister already didn't like her. So James takes the throne as arguably the first truly Protestant monarch of England. Because I'd argue that Edward he was a teenager. He didn't really know what he believed yet.
And he was so Protestant, the Catholics tried to kill him.
Yeah, well. Yeah, so if we're remembering the 5th of November, it's James that we're remembering. No, they didn't even make her regent until he was old enough to talk, because her illegitimate half-brother was going to be regent and run the country. The point is, they wanted Mary completely out of power. She had a bunch of illegitimate brothers, and they were all fairly power hungry. It was a mess. So, we're going to start. Do you have a slide for James?
I do not. I started with his grandson.
Okay. Right. Well, we'll get to the Glorious Revolution in a bit, because that's next. So, I don't remember how to share my own screen. Share screen. There it is. We may have, yeah, we're going to have streamception for a second. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. So, I made a very, very, very big chart for this. There are 160 people on this. So, James, who is called James the First and Sixth because he's the sixth of Scotland and the first of England, married Princess Anne of Denmark. And they had, gotta get all the way over to him here, of the people who matter, they had Charles the First, who married Henrietta Maria of I don't actually remember where, France probably. They had Henry Frederick, who died. They had Elizabeth of Bohemia, who we'll be getting back to. And they had 4 more kids who died. Margaret, Mary, Robert, and Sophia. So, obviously, when James dies, the one who takes the throne is Charles the First.
His only living son.
The only living son, Charles the First.
Because I think Henry was the firstborn, but he obviously dead.
Yeah. Charles is most famous for being executed for tyranny. So for a stretch after Charles dies, England is under Oliver Cromwell, the Lord Protector. And then he dies, and his son takes over briefly, but it's not a monarchy. And then the English people decide they're done with this, and Charles II, son of Charles I, returns in all of his glory. And frankly, he was kind of a glorious king.
Yeah, plus I gotta say, I read about this thing. You think religious fundamentalism is bad now?
Oh man, Oliver Cromwell. The one that I keep going back to is he banned meat pies. Because people ate meat pies at Christmas.
Oh, he banned Christmas.
Banning everything to do with Christmas. And the thing is, to really understand how awful that was, you have to think about the way food kind of worked in those days. The only way a lot of, certainly city-dwelling English people would have had meat was in a pie or maybe a sausage, and he didn't like sausages either. You know, the poor people, when they ate meat, they weren't eating, pieces of chicken or steaks or whatever. They were eating pies. They were eating sausages. They were eating the leftover bits after richer people ate. What do you need?
Lemon drops.
No, I don't think so. So I don't know where they are.
Do I need a lemon drop?
I'm sorry. So...
And this is why spices were important back then.
Yeah, well,
Hi.
The use of spice to disguise rotten meat is a fairly exaggerated concept. Mostly it was if you could afford spice, you were rich.
Oh, I didn't know that it was just for that. I thought it was just to make it last a bit longer.
No, it was really more about what you could afford. The poor people who were eating bad meat couldn't afford spices either. Salt was really important for salting meat. Because salt is a preservation method. Smoking is a preservation method. Spices, the concept is they were disguising flavor, and if you could afford the spice, you could afford fresh meat. The poor people who would have been eating herbs instead of spices, they would have been eating, I believe, sage you can grow in England, onions probably, maybe garlic, thyme, things like that. They couldn't afford meat except as sausages and meat pies. And then Oliver Cromwell freaking banned sausages and meat pies, and no wonder they wanted the monarchy back. So
But why did they just refrigerate their food?
So, Charles returns in all of his glory, and we have the era known as the Restoration, which is known for, incredible extravagance, because Charles had been living in France this whole time. And the French concept of monarchy and the English concept of monarchy were kind of different. The French were a lot more about absolute monarchy. They didn't really have parliament the way the British did. So it's this whole thing.
Yeah. If we ever do a thing with the French Revolution,
Oh boy, yeah.
Their 3-vote system.
Yeah.
Each body gets 1 vote.
The one that has 95% of the population, they also get 1 vote. It's even more unbalanced than Wyoming. So, Charles was an amateur scientist in as much as that existed at the time, and he was very fond of the theater, which had been banned under all of the Cromwell, blah, blah, blah. And he wore very flashy, flamboyant clothing, which had been banned under. And he had many, many mistresses and many, many illegitimate children. And what he did not have,
a kid of his wife,
was a legitimate child. Not even just he didn't have any sons. He flat out did not have children with his wife. And I think we can assume from that his wife was infertile. Because we know they were...
he wasn't.
Not now, Sandy. We know he wasn't infertile, and we know that they were affectionate. They didn't hate each other, and we know that they would occasionally spend the night together. And she just never got pregnant. So I think the historical evidence is that she was infertile. But it doesn't matter. They could have just been unlucky. They could have, there could have been all kinds of reasons why they never had a kid. The point that matters is they didn't. The fact that he had all of those illegitimate children doesn't really matter, because again, they weren't going to inherit. Though it is interesting that
one of them tried.
Well, yeah, one of them tried. But it is also interesting that if William becomes King of England after Charles III dies, he will be the first descendant of Charles II on the English throne, because Princess Diana was descended from one of the illegitimate children. So I do think that's kind of fun to know.
They made a comeback.
Yes. So, Charles dies, no legitimate children, asking for his brother to take care of his favorite mistress, Nell Gwyn, who I'm actually enormously fond of as well. She's one of my favorite historical figures. She's a lot of fun. So, we have James II and 7th. Let me know when we're going to slides.
We can talk about his 3 years first, and we go, because that's when we go to slides when we talk about his 1 kid.
Okay. So James II and 7th, 2nd of England, 7th of Scotland, first marries a woman named Anne Hyde. And they have...
Oh, and James is an open Catholic again.
Yeah, James is openly Catholic. Charles had been a Protestant. James is openly Catholic. So we have Charles, Duke of Cambridge, who dies. If they're grayed out, they're dead before it becomes relevant. His daughter Mary, she's marked as Mary II. We'll get to that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Never mind.
James, Duke of Cambridge, who died. Anne, Charles, Duke of Kendal, who died. Edgar, Duke of Cambridge, who died. Daughter named Henrietta, daughter named Catherine. So, the people think, well, okay, James is Catholic. James is very openly Catholic. But Mary and Anne are both Protestant. When James dies, obviously a Protestant will take the throne and we'll have a queen again, but that's fine. Elizabeth was a great queen, blah, 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 whatever.
So we can deal with this.
Yeah, because Anne Hyde has died by this point, and it's very clear that James is not going to have any more children with her, because she's dead. The astute watcher will notice that there's this other little line coming out from James. And if you know your family tree, you know what that line means. We follow that little line, get past Catherine, and we get to Mary of Modena, James's second wife. Also Catholic. We have 9 stillbirths or infant deaths total. Isabel, who just died young. Louisa Maria Theresa. And then we have James, the Prince of Wales, who is being raised Catholic. And that's not something Parliament is happy about. They don't want a Catholic dynasty. Waiting through one Catholic to get back to Protestants, okay, we can do this. Waiting through a bunch of Catholics, no, we'll not be doing that. So, and eventually we'll get to James's sons, Charles and Henry Benedict. So what they want is not, James. They want Mary. And this is where we get to the Glorious Revolution. And I will go ahead and stop sharing now. So the Glorious Revolution was a religious war. It's the second true religious war in English history. Because the English Revolution, the English Civil Wars had been Catholics versus Protestants, but that had also been deeply, deeply political. Parliament versus royalist. This is just about religion. To be fair, it is not much of a war. James II ruled for 3 years. From 1685 to 1688, when he was deposed by his own daughter, Mary, who, and say it all with me, kids, married her first cousin. Because James I had a daughter, Mary, Princess Royal and Princess of Orange, who had a son named William, who married Princess Mary and became King William. They ruled as William and Mary. It's sort of a joined pair in English history. After they deposed her father. And this was very much no Catholics. That is the lesson we are going to learn about this whole thing can all be summed up with no Catholics. So, after the Glorious Revolution, The English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights, I have to admit, I don't know a ton about.
Yeah, but it's 100 years before our, about give or take 100 years before our Bill of Rights.
Yeah. And I believe it is missing some of the details on ours, such as that whole freedom of religion thing, in as much as, no, you are not free. There were still fines, and it's, no. But it is very much, going back, this one I have to go even further back for. We have to go back to the Magna Carta. If you know your Robin Hood, you know that the whole thing is about King Richard and the evil Prince John. So King Richard dies, and Prince John becomes King John. Unfortunately, Disney is wrong. He is John the First, also John the Worst, because there's only ever been one King John. He was forced by his barons to sign a document giving his barons a certain amount of freedom from the tyranny of the crown. This is where a lot of English law and the concept of English freedom comes from, is the Magna Carta.
Of course, then again, freedom as a loose term here, because this was still the barons. They were.
Oh yeah, no. The original document of the Magna Carta very much had nothing to do with giving the common people freedom. But by making the king no longer an absolute monarch, it does kind of set the stage.
So this was kind of like the precursor to that, the House of Lords.
Yeah, the House of Lords really starts up with Magna Carta. House of Commons, I don't remember about, because this is really not my thing. It definitely existed by the time Elizabeth was queen, but I don't know when it started, because English history is not something I know as immediately as American history. I know a lot of American history without having to look it up. Yeah, all of this wasn't quite living memory for the constitutional generation, the founding fathers, but their parents and grandparents may have been around to know some of this, to have lived through some of this. It is wild. History is more than just a bunch of single individual dates. They all kind of connect to one another if you know the right stories. History is fascinating. So, yeah, so I can't speak a lot about the English Bill of Rights because I don't know a lot, because, mostly because I'm not English, I think. But now we're getting to, so William and Mary have no children.
Yeah, I gotta say this real fast. Around this, well, this is also important. Around the same time, another what's the word? Royal crisis is happening in Spain.
Yeah,
called
the War of Spanish Succession is a thing. The thing is, what's kind of happening at this point in history is that centuries of marrying your cousins is coming due. Because a lot of these families no longer have children, or the children they have don't live very long, or have horrible, Charles the Mad of Spain. Just, yeah. Like, the children from these hundreds of years of cousin marriage are starting to look like the children of hundreds of years of cousin marriage. So the Habsburg line in Spain ends with the aforementioned Charles the Mad, who is so deformed he can't really speak or eat. And he certainly can't produce children with his wife, who was also a cousin of some sort. Because what even are genetics? I mean, you can excuse them not knowing about genetics, but they knew by now that there's a limit to how often you can marry a cousin to a cousin before it starts going bad. You know, like, they've been breeding livestock long enough to know you can only crossbreed for so long, you know?
But they're royal. That doesn't count for them.
Right. They've got to keep the royal blood in the family, and oh boy, no, they don't. So Charles mysteriously cannot produce any heirs. And so who's going to rule Spain is currently this huge war going on the continent. And England wants to avoid that, and also Catholics. So William and Mary reign for a while, have no children. Mary's sister Anne, as I recall, does Mary and Duff have children? Let me look her up real quick.
She married the King of Denmark, or Prince of Denmark. Somebody from Denmark.
Right. She marries someone, it'll tell me. Prince George of Denmark. And she has children and they die. And she has stillbirths.
And one made it to 12 or something, or 11.
Yeah. And let's just skip right down to pregnancies an issue. Stillborn daughter, a daughter who lived 2 years, a daughter who lived less than a year, miscarriage, stillborn son, miscarriage, a son who lived to be about 11 and died of unclear causes, daughter who lived 2 hours, son who lived a few minutes, stillborn daughter, miscarriage, stillborn son, stillborn son. And the last 2 were speculated to have been dead considerably before Anne's body eventually expelled them. There's a movie called The Favorite, which is the only movie I really like by Yorgos Lanthimos about Queen Anne, and she's keeping rabbits. And this is apparently historically true, to make up for how miserable she is about all of her lost children. Maya, we're talking about Queen Anne of England and why her child did not succeed her on the throne, and the answer is because none of them lived long enough. You know, the longest lived one died at 11. Mostly she had stillbirths and miscarriages. She's really a tragic figure because she wanted so much to be a good, loving mother, and her body was like, no. But the thing is, with the death of Anne, we have now run through all of the living children of James II and VI and his first wife. So now the English get to have their very own succession crisis. So,
yeah, but
1701. Anne is still alive, still on the throne at this point. She hasn't even been crowned yet. But when she dies, the people who were alive when she was to be crowned, her father was still alive. But they weren't going to let him back on the throne. Her sister obviously took the throne, Mary II. There's Anne with her child who lived to 11. And then we get
our first skipped,
James Francis Edward Stuart. And I regret that there is no easy way that I know of to flip back and forth between the slides and the family tree that I built.
Here, I can do it. Just put your tree back on. I can tell me when. I can switch back and forth. I can do it.
All right, my tree's up.
Where did it go? Not my end, it isn't.
Okay,
You
well,
you need to share again. You unshared
yes.
it.
Okay. Hello. Okay, I'm up.
Just tell me when.
Go ahead. So, there's Mary of Modena. There's James, Prince of Wales, who is James of the many names, what have you. Who would become known, as I recall, he's the one who becomes known as the Old Pretender. Pretender being it's somebody who makes a claim to a throne that is not recognized. Now there are still people, because of course there are, who believe that all of this was completely illegitimate and we should be following the line of James, Prince of Wales. They are known as Jacobins. They've had to make a few changes because his line dies out pretty early, so they've switched to one of the cousins. But, they're the Battle of Culloden. If you're familiar with Outlander involves Battle of Culloden. You've heard the term Bonnie Prince Charlie. Bonnie Prince Charlie is James's son. So the Scots wanted James on the throne because the monarchs they ended up getting in England were German. And the Scots were like, no thank you, we'll take the Catholic. But
well actually the English I think I read something or heard something that said they said, hey, if you just convert, the kingdom could be yours again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't.
They wanted the Stuarts back. The Stuarts were a Scottish family. They liked the pride of having the Stuarts on the throne, and still thought of themselves at the time as a separate country. I mean, there are still people who think of Scotland as a separate country.
Which makes me wonder if they ever became a separate country again, would they become a republic, or would they just still keep the king but call him?
My understanding is that the current separatists are big on the idea of republic, but I could be wrong, and I'm sure there are separatist monarchists because if you name a position, somebody out there holds it. But I know that Sean Connery was real big on the idea that he wasn't going to die until Scotland was its own country, and he was wrong. I think he had Scotland Forever tattooed on his wrist or some damn thing. Anyway. So James, Prince of Wales. And he is son of James VI and VII and Mary of Modena. And
so he would have been the third and eighth.
Yes, he would have been third and eighth. And then his son Charles would have been Charles the Third.
We got there eventually.
Yeah. Theoretically, his other son Henry could have been Henry the Ninth. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Don't stop sharing this.
Did I do it? I did it. Sorry. I'm not an expert at this end of things. So, where am I going? Following his line to the James, Prince of Wales. Right. And
yeah, at this time, his kids didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'd be next in line.
Yeah, Henry Benedict Thomas Edward Maria Clement Francis Xavier Stuart, who is James's second son, wouldn't be born until 1725. He also became a cardinal. So there's that. He just lived in the Papal States his whole life. Apparently, the Papal States referred to him as the Cardinal Duke of York. So, we've got James Francis Edward. And then we've got Louisa Marisa Teresa Stuart, who's his full sister. One of Maria of Modena's other children. Okay, then William the Third and Second. When there's two numbers, it's because there's a different number for Scotland and England. Anyway, married Mary the Second, not skipped.
Yeah, funny story here. If he had kids after after his wife died, with another wife, those kids would still be after Anne, because technically he was the son of a daughter of Charles I. So
yes, male preference primogeniture is a hell of a drug.
So any kid with Mary would have been obviously first, but any kid by himself,
right? And then after William, if the slide will load, Anne Marie d'Orléans. Let me find her real quick. She is right. Okay. So, I'm going to be sharing again in just a second here. Oh, hold on. Hello. Okay. We set up for me to share?
yes.
Okay. So, Henrietta is who you'll notice had a brother named Henry. 6 names. 12 names in all of Finland. Swear to God. So this is Charles I's daughter, Henrietta, marries Philippe I. I believe he was the Duke of Orléans. And she has 2 living children, 6 stillbirths, miscarriages, or infant deaths. But she has daughters Marie-Louise and Anne-Marie. Because, yes. Okay, we could go back to slides now.
Okay.
So this is Anne-Marie. She is skipped because she is French and Catholic. Victor Amadeus.
Her son.
Oh, I think he's one of the ones who dies.
No, he's alive at the time.
No, I'm not sure how he's not on my chart. I missed someone. Or I went. Victor Amadeus of Savoy. Okay. So I think I see what I'm doing wrong here. Anne-Marie. Okay. No, I got it. It's Anne-Marie's kids. There we are. Guys, I had to go a whole bunch. I'm ready to share again.
Right.
Right. Anne-Marie's kids. We have Victor. We have Charles again. Maria, whose son, who was not born yet and therefore is not relevant, was Louis XV of France. And we have Maria Louisa. So we are getting now, this is the great-grandchildren we're getting to of Charles the First. And this whole line here, they are all French, they are all living in France, they are all Catholic. There might be a nun or two in this group, I don't remember. Okay, I'm done sharing. So Victor Amadeus gets skipped. And Charles Emmanuel, look at those legs, gets skipped. And Marie Adelaide, mother of Louis XV, gets skipped.
Funny here. Oh, go back fast. Here, it's funny, ironic that for the longest time, two things. For the longest time, the king and queens of England claimed the throne of France, but here we have, if this happened, the French king could have claimed the throne of England and Scotland. So,
yeah, no, it's cousins marry.
Also, it'd be ironic that happened too, because the next century of the 7-year war between France and England might not have happened because England was the kingdom of England and France.
We could have gotten at least a one Europe government much, much faster if various wars of succession had gone differently. Maria Luisa Gabriella got skipped. And now we're on to a different... Yes, now we're on to a different branch. And I have to find where I am again.
We are with...
This is where we go to Elizabeth, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So, James had 4 children. Specifically here. Okay, I'm ready to share again.
Right there.
We have Elizabeth of Bohemia. As you can tell, married into the Bohemian royal line. And this is where we start getting into this branch. So she has Henry Frederick dies. Charles I Louis. Charles II, Elector Palatine. Elizabeth Charlotte. Alexandre Louis, Philippe, Elizabeth. Philippe has a crap ton of children. Marie Isabel dies. Marie Louise Elizabeth, Louise Adelaide, Charlotte Aglaé, which is a name I had never heard before. Louis d'Orléans, Louise Elizabeth, Philippine Elizabeth, and Louise Diane. And then his sister Elizabeth had 9 infant deaths, stillbirth, miscarriages. Son Leopold Clement Charles. Her son Francis Stephen became Holy Roman Emperor, married Maria Theresa, and their child was Marie Antoinette. Elizabeth Therese, Charles Alexandra Emmanuel, and Anne Charlotte. And we can go back to slides now and see all of these fine people. Except Marie Antoinette, who I just sort of discovered and felt was worth, throwing out there. But yeah, if you want to go back to slides.
I'm already there.
Okay, I can't tell. So, Elizabeth Charlotte and Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, and Marie Louise Elizabeth, and Louise Adelaide. Aglaé. It's such a weird name. I don't know.
Yeah, some of these names probably have those things above them that I can't type out.
Elizabeth Charlotte. You've got Elizabeth Charlotte on here twice.
Yeah. Oopsie.
There may have been 2 Elizabeth Charlottes.
Yeah, one was his daughter. I think one was her daughter.
Right. So many people with the same name. It's just insane. Louis Otto, who I think we're getting into a different line here.
Yes.
I know I have Louis Otto.
We are now in the son, the Edward line. This was
Okay,
the
right.
daughter of Charles, this Elizabeth's son Charles, and now we're in Elizabeth's son's Edward.
Yeah, she had a bunch more kids who didn't have kids of their own. Then we get to Edward, Count Palatine of Simmern, and I was very careful for the RN because of kerning. So if you want to share here, or if you already are,
Yeah, I'm on this.
Okay.
Just say tree or slide, and I'll move it automatically.
All right, we can do tree. So Edward, Count Palatine of Simmern. Look at that. That's an RN, people. Kerning. And he had a daughter named Louise Marie, who had a daughter named Louise Apollonia, son named Louis Otto, a daughter named Louise Apollonia, but with a hyphen this time, and a daughter named Eleanor Christine. I would have such a problem with this. And then a daughter named Anne Henriette, who had 5 children die young. Daughter named Marie Therese, who had 4 children who died young. Marie Anne, Louis Armand, Louise Adelaide. Son named Louis, who had so many children. So many children. Henry, no children. I think she was a nun. Louise Benedict, 3 children die in infancy. Louis Auguste, Louis Charles, and Louise Francois. And Marie Anne, I think, was also a nun. And then over here, Henrietta Benedicta and Sophie, Charlotte Felicitas, which is my favorite of these names. Henriette Marie, Wilhelmine Amalia, who married Joseph the First Holy Roman Emperor, Marie Josefa Leopold Joseph, and Maria Amalia. Slide.
All right.
So then Eleanor Christine. And some of these people you can't really find paintings of. It's just a thing. Anne Henriette. I do love the wigs and the costumes and the... Oh, it's fantastic. Charles de Bourbon. Yeah, Marie Anne Eleanor became a nun. It was actually interesting to me how many of the women in this family I discovered became nuns, despite the fact that theoretically they would have been highly prized on the marriage market. Louise Elizabeth de Bourbon, Louise Anne, Marie Anne, Louise Elizabeth, Louise Anne, Marie Anne, Marie Anne, Louise Benedict, Louis Auguste. And you'll notice a lot of these people start getting their own titles. And that's because they're marrying into very wealthy families and noble families. She looks annoyed by the whole thing. Bzz. I waved. You can't see it, but I did. And then I think we have to get onto a different line.
Still Edward's descendants.
Okay. So he is... Good God. Right. Okay, yeah, no, this is... I know where we are. It's so hard to keep track of all of this. Benedetta. Amalia. With a name like Benedetta, how would you know she was Catholic? Okay, and then
we are finally out of the Edwards kids.
Yes. Now let me find where I am on my slides. Louise. I'm not sure where Louise is on my slides. Around here somewhere.
Daughter of Elizabeth.
Oh, no, there she is. Okay, I got her. Tree. So Louise is here because I actually have them in order of birth at this point. Elizabeth, Rupert, Morris, Louise. Louis died young. Edward, Henriette Marie, Jean-Philippe Frederick, Charlotte died young. And then we find Sophia, Electress of Hanover. And what you may not know is that not everyone of English ancestry is in line for the British throne, because the law they passed eventually said that you had to descend from Sophia, Electress of Hanover, who we have finally, after going through this enormous number of Catholic people in huge wigs, gotten to.
The first Protestant.
The first Protestant. All of those people that we skipped were either Catholics, married to Catholics, or both. They changed the law a while back so you could be married to a Catholic again.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. That's late at the end.
Yeah. But at this point, if you were even married to a Catholic, because the assumption would be that a Catholic would insist on their children being raised Catholic. So, were these people personally themselves Catholic? Most of them, yes, especially the nuns and the cardinal. But, you know, it didn't matter if they were married to Catholics. So we get to Sophia, Electress of Hanover. And she has George, Frederick Augustus, 3 stillbirths, Maximilian William, Sophia Charlotte, Charles Philip, Christian Henry, and Ernest Augustus. And the important one here is this guy called George the First. Because George the First would take the throne. Actually, Sophia didn't outlive Anne, as I recall.
By a week, I think.
By a week. She was holding on. She was determined she was going to be Queen of England, and she missed it by a week. So, but her son George, who doesn't speak English, comes in from Hanover, which is in Germany, and takes over as George the First of England.
You may know his great-grandson.
Yeah, we fought a little war against a couple of guys named George at one point. The 3rd and 4th slide.
Okay.
So, there's Sophia. And there's George, the first Hanover king. Also, great legs.
Funny story here. Before this whole went down the rabbit hole, I thought, because no one ever mentioned them, I thought it was like maybe he went right to her second cousin. Only one alive at the time. Not they skipped 20,000 people.
They skipped like half of Europe apparently, because of the determination to prevent further religious war.
Yeah, and now again, this is the 45 people alive at the time. If we had more kids, it'd be a lot.
There are so many kids that I didn't track all of these people very far. I was just trying to make sure that I had all of the people who were on the list. And every once in a while, I'd follow a rabbit hole. A few people died and go, "Oh, well, so and so is descended," and I'd mention that person because it is interesting that Marie Antoinette was descended from Henry VII of England. Like, I don't think I had known that before I started doing this particular project.
Yeah,
because
I didn't know that one of the other descendants was Louis the 15th, who was the grandfather of Marie Antoinette's husband.
Yeah. So Marie Antoinette, I mean, it's not a surprise that she was marrying a distant cousin, but I didn't realize that they were distant cousins because of English blood. That part was a surprise to me. Because I know certain amounts of English history very, very well, but this is not particularly an area of my expertise. I wanted to talk about this in part because the Protestant Catholic thing in England and all the stuff you can blame on Henry VIII never stops being funny to me. But I never traced who all... I knew at one point, I learned as an adult that they skipped all of these enormous numbers of people. But I didn't realize how a lot of them were connected towards other people I'd actually heard of. Because I'm going to be real with you here, I've never heard of most of these people outside doing this list.
Neither did I.
I knew 3 or 4 of them. No, that's not true, because I knew all the ones who actually ruled. And I knew this...
So I didn't even know that Charles I had another daughter. I knew of Mary, but it was the mother of William, but I didn't know he had another daughter.
Yeah, I knew that he had a decent-sized family.
Sorry. I meant a daughter. When I say that, I meant another daughter that lived long enough to have kids herself.
Right, because a lot of these people had enormous families if you include all of the ones who, in some way, died before being noteworthy. You know, and obviously I knew that there were a lot of dynastic marriages and a lot of cousin marriages. But I didn't know how some of these people connected to one another and connected into French history. You know, I knew about German history because I knew that the Hanovers were a German line that came and took over England with George I. Because that became a joke for a couple of centuries, was that the monarchs were Germans. But I didn't know that, you know, the family married into the Bourbons, because I forgot that the Bourbons married people who weren't other Bourbons, with the occasional Habsburg thrown in. You know, I didn't know about Marie Antoinette being part of this line, and that this line produced a couple of Holy Roman Emperors, and, you know, that was completely news to me. But that's one of the things I love about history, and that's one of the reasons I like coming on here to talk about history, because even when it's a subject that I thought I knew, and again, we're being real here, this was not a subject I thought I knew particularly well. I just like blaming Henry VIII for things. But even when it's a subject that I think I know, I still learn things. Doing preparation and double checking myself and actually looking at dates a lot of the time, I think, oh, wait a minute, these 2 dates line up, which means that these are connected items.
Yeah.
You know, let's figure out what the actual connection is there.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know if you get the same problem, but going back and forth on the family tree on Wikipedia was so hard. Like, I had to go down, click, go back up again, go back down again.
Yeah. And folks, the reason I made the chart, the reason I took time this week to find software that would let me build a family tree that wasn't mine, was that I knew that it's easier to visualize on a family tree how all these people are connected than to just say, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, daughter of so-and-so. No, you need the picture. You need the image.
Yeah, so who used to make the chart again? Who made the chart?
This was I made this chart.
Well, I know you made it. But...
Yeah, it's a site called Family Echo. And you would probably, if you want to use it for fiction world building, it would probably be fairly helpful for that as well.
So Family Echo, you want to sponsor us?
It was, once I figured out the software, it was incredibly easy to use. There are a lot of features that I didn't use because they were not, strictly speaking, relevant to what we were doing. You know, if I were building a family tree for other reasons, this would not be a bad website to use. FamilyEcho.com. But, yeah, My strongest era of English history is the Elizabethan era. I connect with Elizabeth, and I connect with a lot of the other things that happened during her reign.
Okay.
Shakespeare was alive.
Okay.
In
Yeah. Chris, you've got to clarify now. Elizabethan the first era.
I do mean the thing is nobody refers to the modern era as the Elizabethan era. And I think that's because the power of the monarchy has waned so substantially that you're not going to think of the reign of Elizabeth II as a single unified era because so much else is going on at that time.
It was
And
also
she's controlling almost none of it.
Yeah, it was ironic since she's the longest ever living British or English monarch.
She's the longest ever reigning monarch of. Well, I'm pretty sure she's the longest of Scotland as well. Less sure about that, but probably.
Yeah, her great grandmother Victoria, second place.
Yes. Elizabeth I is certainly top 5, as I recall. She reigned a long time because she was fairly young when her sister died. That's the other thing. I always remember Catherine's age because there's such a big age gap between Mary and Elizabeth. But I understand intellectually why it was so important to so many people that the monarch not be Catholic, especially in those days. But I still can't help thinking of it as being awfully silly. And part of that is because I am, neither. All Christian denominations believe so much of the same thing that going to war over your monarch sees God very, very slightly differently than you do. It's just silly to me. Like, deposing Oliver Cromwell I can get behind, but you're the wrong kind of Christian as long as you're not executing people of a different kind of Christian. I don't care. One of the reasons I vibe with Elizabeth I the way I do is she was eventually forced to make laws against Catholics, but her initial thought was that she wanted all men to go to the devil in their own way. And I think that's because religion had torn her family apart. Fairly literally. I mean, arguably helped kill her mother. She had very, very strong feelings on how caring too much about religion was bad. And I think she would have found this whole succession crisis enormously funny and also enormously frustrating. Especially because I think she would have known how much her father's first thought would have been, but at least the Prince of Wales was a boy. Like, she wouldn't have, Henry VIII wouldn't have cared if his son was Catholic or Protestant or Hindu or, Scientologist. As long as it was a boy, that was what mattered to Henry. And then within 150 years, boy was not as important, and that was partially because Elizabeth had been such a successful reigning monarch.
Yeah. You want to go to the last slide now?
Sure. Yes. Perth Agreement of 2011. Male preference primogeniture has been replaced by absolute primogeniture. So let's break down our terms here. Primogeniture is firstborn inherits completely. In France, and obviously this wasn't true of the throne, but one of the issues in France was that they divided land instead of giving it to the firstborn. So a lot of people were living on really small amounts of land and couldn't survive on it. Primogeniture is firstborn inherits completely.
Now we're going to go back to France real fast too, because later on they went to, I think it was male only primogeniture that the female.
France was male only primogeniture for a really long time. They had what was called a Salic law, which was only boys.
And not even to the female line. If you had a sister, you had to go all the way to your second cousin.
Yeah. Your sister couldn't inherit, but your sister's kids couldn't inherit either. In France, it was through a male-only line. And that's why the throne of France goes a lot more wobbly than the throne of England to various cousins and other lines and other houses.
Yeah, technically they're all still the House of Capet, but
right,
different.
Right. And this is something I know about mostly because of Mary Queen of Scots was of the House of Guise. Her mother was Marie de Guise, and her Guise uncles were constantly battling with Bourbons and Orleans and all of these other French, who were all House of Capet. But because somebody had descended from a girl at some point, there's all this infighting. And they have to be very, very careful about who's descended from boys along the way. And it's just ridiculous.
And that goes back to the 100-year War.
Yeah. And England was like, no, thank you. And was male preference primogeniture, which is why there are a lot of kings in English history who have older sisters. Because the older sister can't inherit.
Unless all the brothers are dead.
Unless all the brothers die, and then the oldest sister. Like with Edward. Leaving aside the legitimacy thing, because Henry declared both of his daughters legitimate in his will, despite that being religiously and logically impossible. Under the laws at the time.
But he was the head of the church. He could do anything.
Exactly.
He made his own religious laws.
Both Mary and Elizabeth were legitimate under Henry's will, but their younger brother became king before either of them became queen because he was a boy.
The same thing happened with Henry's sister, Margaret, and then later Charles' sister, Elizabeth.
Right. The boys inherit first. And if the boy dies, then it keeps going through his line until his line runs out, and then we jump into a line headed by a girl. The next nearest line headed by a girl gets to take over. And that's male preference primogeniture. And the only British royal birth in centuries that was a matter of any kind of interest to me on a historical level was the birth of Prince Archie? William's kid. Because I had hoped.
No, Archie is Harry. Archie is Harry's kid.
So whatever
George.
William's.
George.
Yeah. I don't care a lot. When he became a boy, when he was born a boy, he stopped being interesting to me. Maybe he'll be trans and he'll fool all of us. But the point is, even if George had been a girl, he would have been next in line for the throne no matter what his younger siblings were. Because the new law in England, and he's the first royal child in direct line for the throne born under that law, whether he was a boy or a girl, he was going to be the next on the throne.
So I think it's George, Charlotte, Louis, and now it won't. Before it went from George to skip to Louis, then back to Charlotte. Now it's birth order.
Yeah. Now it is just flat birth order, regardless of gender. as of 2011, because we're being progressive.
I think the only I think the only one that's still no preference right now that I know of is Spain. So right now the heir is that Leonora of Spain. She's the heir. But if her father had to have the son, she's out of luck.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the houses have gone to just absolute primogeniture because we've established by now that it's possible to have reigning queens. You can have a queen regnant in the year of our Lord 2025 without plunging your country into decades of civil war, it turns out.
Also, another funny story. Technically, the current king of Spain is a Capet.
Yes, because cousins. And that gets into the War of Spanish Succession, which I know a tiny bit about, but not very much. I know it's because the Habsburgs.
Yeah,
That's
we might get to that.
version.
We might study that later. Who knows? Go share this video with a million people.
The short version of what went wrong with half the lines of European royalty were because Habsburg.
And number two, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but go full detail now.
Yeah, you can now marry a Catholic. You can't be one. And I have to admit that it makes a certain amount of sense to me that they do want the monarch of England to be a member of the Church of England. Like, I kind of get that, but I also think it's silly to still have the monarch as the head of the church. I don't know how I think they should do it differently. It is kind of silly. So,
If you like, the president had to be the Church of America.
Right, exactly. Like, yeah, okay, the head of state of Vatican City is the Pope, but also Vatican City is like 6 blocks. It doesn't count.
Of course, if you ask some people, the president is the Church of America right now.
Oh, don't even get me started. So, it's one of those where I understand the reasons on an intellectual level for the system that led to that particular chunk of history, while still just not being able to make myself care about the issues on any kind of emotional level. And the only reason I cared about the firstborn of William, who is younger than I am, I would note. Actually, Zane is about the same age as George, as I recall.
And I'm about the same age as William.
I remember his parents' wedding. Not clearly, but I remember it. I remember staying up for it. And that's about all I remember. But, the only reason I cared was that I was so happy about having replaced male preference primogeniture, which is an ancient and primitive system that we should have moved past decades to centuries ago. But then their firstborn was a boy anyway, and that wasn't as exciting.
But yeah, but still, if he unfortunately dies, his sister will be above his other brother.
Yes. At least she is next in line after her brother until such point as her brother has kids, and that's still a victory. The monarchy is a pointless and largely irrelevant system anyway. It was just nice to them.
Because we got point out here. This is only for people born after this point.
Right.
Charles III's sister, and still after her brothers, even though she's second oldest.
Yes. And in a way, I can understand that because he's been treated as the heir his entire life, and to suddenly swap that on him is just kind of mean.
Well, he was
Especially,
the firstborn. Well, he was the firstborn anyway, so he'd been the heir no matter what.
yeah. But, I mean, they weren't going to go to Andrew next. That was something everybody was pretty clear on. No matter what happened, no Andrew. For some reason. Can't imagine.
Yeah, the funny thing is, unlike I gotta go political real fast. Unlike here in America, they have no problem saying, yeah, he was on the list.
Yeah, no. The royal family's like, do we want to talk about it? No, not particularly. Will we admit it? Yes, fine, whatever. And Parliament's like, yes, he's on the list. He is still Prince Andrew because only an act of Parliament can remove him from all of that. I would argue Parliament should get off their butts and do that. But also it's not really all that important because so many people between him and the throne right now, and there's more of them all the time.
Yeah, I do think Parliament should, because right now this absolute prime minister is only for the royal line.
Yeah,
his daughter still can inherit the Duke of Yorkdom.
Yeah, I think they should strip him of his titles. He's already been stripped of pretty much everything that can be done without parliamentary approval. I think they should finish the job. I think the main reason they don't is that sounds like work, and they've got more important things to do. But I think it would set a nice precedent.
Yeah, I think they also got rid of the. I know that they also got rid of that earlier. Like you say, they got rid of the divorce thing because Charles married because Elizabeth's uncle got in trouble for.
It's so funny because Charles's uncle, who was also, let's be clear, it would have been a terrible king by standards of terrible kings. He was close personal friends with the ruler of Germany at the time in the 1930s. But anyway, he abdicated because they didn't want to let him marry a divorced woman. And Charles married a divorced woman and everything's fine. And I saw a really funny thing recently about, how dare we let somebody who's divorced and cheated on his wives and blah, 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 take over the Church of England. And, what are we saying about the morals of the Church of England if we let that happen? And somebody's like, boy, do I have a story to tell you. And there's just this picture of Henry VIII. But Charles's great uncle wasn't allowed to marry a divorced woman and stay head of the Church of England. And while I think that's some nonsense, at least it took him out of being king, which is a net benefit to world history.
Yeah, looking back now, him marrying an American divorced woman is the least of the worries we have with him.
Oh yeah, no, and I know enough about her so that her being an American divorced woman was the least bad thing about her. She was, if anything, worse than he was. She may or may not have had affairs with several prominent members of the German government. But, Charles was able to marry Camilla, and that's, I have no problem with that.
There's rumors that I forget the airplane people were called, the Luftwaffe,
yes,
knew where the bomb in the Buckingham Palace.
Yeah. I think Diana would have lived a longer and happier life if he just married Camilla in the first place. That is not exactly a hot take either. What's funny is, so I think I mentioned this to you when we were working on slides, but there's a term in royalty called a morganatic marriage, which is a marriage where your partner is not part of the line of succession. Your children with that, you are married, but your children with that person are not in the line of succession. And I'm pretty sure Charles and Camilla's marriage is technically considered a morganatic marriage, which I think is enormously funny given how old she was when they got married. Like, just in case she had been a medical miracle and had children, her children were not in the line of succession.
Even if they were at this point, they'd be like 10th of the line.
Oh yeah, no, they'd be so far out of the line of succession that it basically wouldn't even matter. It'd be like that whole thing where the Secretary of Agriculture has to go sit out the State of the Union in a bunker or something. So Eddie, I'm pretty sure the main reason for number 2 is because the monarch of England is the head of the Church of England. So in that sense, it does make a certain amount of sense. They don't want the head of the Church of England to be Catholic, and I don't blame them. But yeah, we talked about it. It's fine. But you look back at all of this from a modern perspective, and so much of it feels so irrelevant. All of these dozens of people who lived and died and had children or didn't, and impacted history or didn't, and we ended up with an obscure German line on the throne of England.
Who is the ancestor of their current family.
Yeah. And you have to be descended from that line. So it doesn't matter, if you're of English blood, that doesn't automatically make you in line for the throne. There's only about 3,000 odd people in line for the throne. You have to be descended from the House of Hanover, from a very specific branch of the House of Hanover. And again, you can't be Catholic, though you can now be married to a Catholic. So well done that, I suppose.
And now, if you're a girl, you won't be skipped.
Yeah, they're not going to skip you in favor of your younger brother if you're a girl. So that's nice. But so much of monarchy is an absolute accident. Because I'm firmly of the belief that a vast majority of people have the religious belief that they do because that's how they were raised.
Yeah. Also, the monarchy thing again. We mentioned this earlier with the starting with the Magna Carta and later the English Bill of Rights and stuff. Mm-hmm. And one quite well. Do you think starting the Magna Carta, that's the reason why English monarchy is even still relevant? Well, all the other monarchies fell away and died off.
Yeah. I would say that had Oliver Cromwell been less of a dour loon, the English Civil War might have held and the monarchy might not have been restored. I think the main reason, the two main reasons for the restoration were, number one, they tried to put Oliver Cromwell's son in place and he wasn't very good at it. And number two, the oppressive laws under Oliver Cromwell. And there were no examples to set for, well, here's the kind of Republican government we could just have instead. Because everybody else at the time was a monarchy.
Yeah. but after that, they still limited what the king could do.
Yeah, there were limits on the power of the king, and you go another 100-odd years down the road, and you get the American Revolution. And the American Revolution had the example of Parliament to say, okay, that's what our government can look like. And instead of having a king, maybe we'll do this other thing instead. And as you may recall from our Constitution talk, it was very much not a certainty that they wouldn't have a lifetime appointment or election or whatever as president. They were talking about a lifetime appointment to the job of presidency for a while. And it wouldn't have been inherited, but it's not difficult to see how it would have been inherited. Not from George Washington, because he didn't have any biological children that we know of. Certainly he had no legitimate biological children. But it's not difficult to see how a lifetime appointment becomes a monarchy. But, we had this example and we said, okay, we're going to do this system of government and it's going to look like this because it's going to be based on parliament because we like representation. And then the French Revolution was able to look at the American Revolution and say, oh, well, they've got this system of government that doesn't need a king. And we're going to do this. Parts of the French Revolution were good and parts of it went way too far.
Yeah,
but
unlike England, the French monarch was called absolute.
Yeah, part of the issue was that the French monarchy was still an absolute monarchy at the time, and so there was no chill in France in the 1790s. Chill was abolished by active government because they went from absolute monarchy to rule of the people, and they didn't have a structure for rule of the people. And so the extremists kind of ran with things, and they started just chopping off random people's heads, and it went very, very badly. I don't inherently have a problem with the ideals of the French Revolution. However, all of my French Revolution talk comes with a big line of if or but.
I think it's funny, they went from monarchy to republic to empire.
To empire, and then back to a different monarchy, and then republic again. Yeah, France took a while to kind of settle because France had only ever known extremes. But also, they did have the model of the American system of government, and then other countries that started abolishing their monarchies knew that you could set up a government. And by the time, you get to republics in Germany and Italy and Spain and wherever.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think World War I was found marking point, because after World War One, the German Empire, monarch, emperor, and funny story that I did not know that they still have little kings. It's still kings in Germany.
They've got so many princes because they're princes of every 7 square miles in Germany. It's amazing.
And then the Archduke or Emperor Austria failed. The Emperor or Sultan of the Ottoman Empire fell. The only one that was still left after that big one, there's still the little one still, was the English people. English.
Yeah, and the Scandinavian countries, several of them have kings or queens, and Belgium, and there's a handful of European countries that still do have monarchs. But pretty much by and large, those were all constitutional monarchies. They were either, to my recollection, they were pretty much all either on the winning side or neutral during the World Wars. Spain is its own thing because of what went on with the Spanish monarchy and Francisco Franco, who is still dead. And the whole thing there. So Spain is its own case, but most of the countries that still have monarchs manage to avoid any kind of dictatorship and segue peacefully into a constitutional monarchy. And England is really the example of a constitutional monarchy, in part, I think, because Charles I got executed. It was like, look, we don't need a king. We'll take one back now, but we don't need one. Oh, we don't like this king? Yeah, we're going to have another war, and we're going to have a different king. And it became very clear that while they have a monarch, there's still also so much power with the people that the monarch cannot override their will, because they've seen how that goes for them.
And hopefully, here in America, we have learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
And not let our person in charge do that kind of stuff.
You know how the saying goes, those who have learned their history are doomed to watch other people repeat it. I'm aware that almost 24 hours of Constitution movie is a very, very long talk. At the very least, I strongly urge you to go read your Constitution. But there are also a lot of historical nuggets that I think, I like to hope you will find interesting in that 24-hour talk. And if you don't want to watch it in a full 24 hours, there are the individual sections. Eddie, we covered primogeniture, but it's basically firstborn inherits, is the short version. So learning all of this stuff is very important because it helps you navigate your own world. And I said in our Constitution talk that one of the reasons the founding fathers, who cannot be seen as a mass, but speaking generally, one of the reasons they set up the government the way they did was that the Glorious Revolution was not that far out of living memory for them. And the English Civil War was only a couple hundred years back for them. And, there were still this heavy weight of, this is what happens when sectarian violence takes over, when tyranny takes over. We've seen the effects. And of course, the French Revolution was happening pretty much at the same time as the Constitutional Convention. Certainly the lead up to the French Revolution was at the same time. So they're like, look, we don't want tyranny, but we also don't want chaos. So here is threading a needle between those two extremes. And that is why it's really, really important to learn your history, so you can understand what the dangers are. And I don't believe we should absolutely follow what the founding fathers wanted, because A, there's no single thing. And B, they weren't gods. They were men
So we don't go to the extreme of trying to cancel several late night talk shows, because you don't.
I don't even like Jimmy Kimmel.
I never even watched him before.
I've only ever watched Jimmy Kimmel really when he hosts the Oscars. I don't even like Jimmy Kimmel. I don't want to be championing Jimmy Kimmel, but I will. Freedom of speech is a really, really important American value, and that includes your freedom to criticize.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, not him, I guess I already mentioned before that not just Trump, he made fun of Biden, Bush, Obama, Clinton, or I'm not Clinton, he wasn't around it, but.
If you have not seen Colbert doing his Joe Biden impersonation, do yourself the favor. It's very funny. But, some of our founding virtues are your right to make extremely mild comments about your government, or for the love of God, to speak the truth about the political affiliation of somebody who did an act that you yourself do not necessarily agree with, and that your opponents definitely don't agree with.
like I did not definitely agree with Kirk's thing, but I let him say it.
Like, I didn't like Charlie Kirk either.
Yeah, but I still like he can
But
say.
I do agree that political violence is an inherently slippery slope that I kind of like to avoid. But what got Kimmel fired was saying that the guy who shot him was conservative, which, spoiler, the guy who shot him was conservative. Like, Charlie Kirk was shot by a guy for whom Charlie Kirk wasn't extreme enough. Which makes you worry about the killer, really. But you need to be allowed to say a factual thing. Like, that's one of, if we can't speak the truth, what are we even doing?
You want more of that? We can go to our First Amendment talk about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. A whole hour talk alone on that.
It may be a subject I care about. But I do also think that a lot of the First Amendment stems from the lessons learned in the time between the English Civil War. They call it something else now, but I don't remember what, and I grew up calling it the English Civil War, and the Glorious Rebellion, the Glorious Revolution. Between those two times is really where a lot of the importance of the First Amendment comes from because of what happened in that stretch. So that's why things like the Act of Succession are still relevant in our day-to-day lives. Also because we can blame Henry VIII.
All right. So, anything coming up that you want to advertise?
Well, tomorrow evening, I will be joining friend of the channel, Maya Adkisson, on Bad Science Sunday. I know what we're talking about because she and I hashed it out this morning, and it's going to be enormously fun. We're going to be talking about a cult compound that, according to the map I looked at today, is 17 minutes drive away from me. So that'll be fun.
Are you going to report live from there?
They're closed on weekends. Also, I wouldn't want to try to climb their wall. And then let's see. Today's article over on Media Magpies was Fred McMurray. Tomorrow will be Catherine O'Hara. And yesterday I managed to tie in the obscure 1938 short Mother Goose Goes Hollywood to the Jimmy Kimmel thing. So, yeah, I've got a lot of stuff up on Media Magpies. I'm in the process of trying to get some interviews done to post more on the YouTube channel for that. And looking forward to hanging out with Maya and Tap tomorrow evening.
As for me, this Wednesday, Maya's sidekick or vice president Tap will be on my channel along with Landon Knoll to talk about how we went from thinking the sun went around the earth went around the sun, and this whole multiple year history of different models.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Why we went to thinking, oh, the sun is setting and rising. We must be the center of the universe to the way we think now. It was a long road.
Everything's expanding out from everything else, therefore I am the center of the universe. Waha.
Right,
it's just so is everything else.
If you haven't checked, if you haven't, if you're interested in history and stuff, like I said, check out either our whole movie at the 23 hours, or you want to visit places, break it down. We have that too. Or if you want to learn what Jillian thinks about Disney animated movies, Pixar movies, and the remake movies. Check out her talking about those movies.
I have many opinions about many things.
But until then, never stop learning. Enjoy the randomness. We will see
Bye.
you next time. Bye. Hey, thanks for watching my podcast or Let's Play. If you want to help support my channel, you can make a monthly or yearly pledge on Patreon, or just a one-time donation on Vimeo, PayPal, or Cash App. For those looking for something to wear, we have some shirts, hats, and other stylish things in our merch store. If you enjoy gaming, you can always follow and sub to me on Twitch. For those who don't want to give money, I have an Amazon and Steam wish list who can help the channel out. And of course, just liking, leaving a comment, and sharing this video helps more than you can imagine. And always remember to never stop learning and enjoy the randomness.